What's going on, everybody? This is Clydean Fair. Let's talk about Wartales, Warrior Builds Edition. I've gotten a few requests over the course of me creating Wartales content, asking me for information on good builds for different units. And I was originally going to make just one really big build video, but that wasn't going to work because there's a lot of builds out there. And I am not going to go over every single potential build, mix, and matchup or anything like that. I'm just going to give you guys 3 different ideas on how to build your warriors and utilize them in specific role situations. There's also a ton of misinformation out on YouTube right now, so I want to make sure I got this right over how to properly min-max people. And quite frankly, you don't need to min-max units at all in order for you to be successful in the game of Wartales. This is a very forgiving game in that aspect. I almost never min-max my units, so take that into consideration if you want. But I will still give you the information that you need until Shiro Games patches it and breaks everything again. Anyway, I'm not going to be concerning any more of the overall balance of Wartales in this video because, quite frankly, there's enough of that to make its own video. So we're going to be moving on to what you guys came here for. Axe Boy builds. First and foremost, we are going to be going over the stat point or aptitude points for your warriors. First and foremost, we have strength. Strength is the primary damage attribute of most units, spare archers and rangers, which are the bows and rogues. Anyway, strength also increases critical damage, which means not the percent chance for you to deal a critical hit, but when you do hit a critical hit, that's the modifier for increasing the damage of the critical hit. Normally, I would say that it's good to put points into this, but it's not. We'll get into why later. Second, we have dexterity. Dexterity is a secondary stat for warriors in general because they don't scale off of dexterity. The secondary effect of dexterity is increasing critical hit chance, but there isn't a point in putting any points into dexterity considering there is your own critical hit stat further on down the line. Third, we have constitution. I am kind of a sucker for constitution. I love using it, but if you're actually equipping everyone with armor of their level, you really don't need it because, well, armor is essentially more health. And as you level up your units, they also gain constitution points. Their health, their maximum health does increase regardless if you put points into it. So if these 3 main primary stats all increase on their own upon level ups, maybe we should focus on the ones that don't really increase that much, which leads into willpower, which is arguably the best stat in Wartales. And let me tell you why. Overall, willpower not only increases your morale, but it also will give you increased critical hit chance every few points or whatever. And that's not why it's overpowered. Willpower is overpowered because of a little thing that we like to call galvanized. Galvanized is the status effect that takes over on your troops whenever you have defeated so many enemies on the field. Galvanization as a status effect is super broken and overpowered, and quite frankly, being able to trigger that earlier is better than putting any points into strength or dexterity or constitution. Moving on from willpower, we have critical hit. Now, critical hit not only increases your critical hit chance, but also your critical hit damage. So yeah, if your main argument for going into dex or strength was for critical hit chance, just dump it into this stat instead. And last but not least, my personal favorite stat is movement. Eventually, once you get to late game, most encounters are only going to be 1 or 2 rounds max. So you're going to want to get your units into a position very quickly and remove enemy units from the board by taking them out. And then you may want to move on to a new unit if you still have actions left. If you don't have the movement for it, you're not going to be able to do that. So make sure you invest into movement so you can have the ability to move on from one unit to the next and take out 2 or 3 units in one turn. Overall, your stat summary, I highly recommend grabbing movement and then willpower and then critical hit chance. Grab whatever rolls a +2 out of those 3 in that order. And if you want to really min-max it, grab the knowledge point for career plans. Just grab it at the very beginning of the game. So that way, every time you level up, you're able to always get a 2. It's going to cost influence and it's going to hurt a little bit, especially early game. You'll be fine. And the bonus bonus into those stats will really make a difference if you want to look at it from a min-maxing perspective. Now that we've gotten stat points out of the way, let's dig into specializations. And by dig in, I mean bloop. They're here. You can read them. I'm going to explain these builds that I've created, and you can follow along and figure out why I decided to do this. But there's definitely some abilities that are stronger than others, which leads into my first axe build. This axe build is primarily going to be a one-handed axe user, and in my spearman build, I didn't really go over one-handed versus two-handed because all spears are two-handed in this game. But now we're starting to get into weapons that have, well, variations. This axe build is meant to primarily be a one-handed axe build with a offhand dagger to increase critical hit chance. Any one-handed axe will do. But starting out, we're going to go with berserker, which gives it rampage, and it essentially gives him 3 attacks. Every critical hit gives him fury on that for his next attack. So if you're able to critical hit frequently, well, you're going to do a lot of damage with rampage. Next up, we have valorous duel. Now, valorous duel will generate a valor point whenever you engage an enemy in combat. So it's strong, but it's not super strong, because if you kill an enemy before they turn around and engage you, so if you kill them in one attack, you don't generate the valor point. So it's kind of a waste of that aspect, but there is no valorous victory on this, and I feel like this is the best one, especially for this unit. Next up, we have madness. Madness increases the damage dealt by 50% when an enemy's at 30% health or less. When you upgrade it, it deals 50% bonus damage against units with 50% health or less. It really makes rampage in particular do more damage, because not only do you have 50% damage boost to all of the attacks on rampage if someone's at under half health, it's just really nice, especially when you mix it in with this next one, ecstasy. As long as this unit has 30% health or less, they will always deal critical hits. Pretty nice, right? Except 30% health is pretty low. Well, that's why you upgrade it, and now as long as this unit is under 50% health, you will always deal crits. That's where it starts going really strong. So ecstasy combined with rampage generating fury for every critical hit, combined with madness always dealing an extra 50% damage whenever your enemy's under 50% health when everything's upgraded, starts to really add up. But wait, there's more. We're going to grab a lone wolf. As long as there's no allied units within 5 meters of you, you deal 10% more damage and take 10% less damage. This is literally meant to be a one-handed berserker that you just send into the enemy lines and let him play around. Moving on from our first build, we are going to dig into our second build. Yes. Now this build is going to feel fairly similar to the build that I had earlier. I'm going to start off with berserker on this build, and that is because executioner's cutting maelstrom is just really broken right now. It's not good. Hopefully Shiro Games is able to patch it and actually fix it. But cutting maelstrom costs 2 valor points and deals 10 damage to all units in the target area, and it attacks an additional time for each unit in that area, which would be really strong combining it with valorous chain, except it only counts as 1 attack, not 2 or 3. So if you were able to hit 2 or 3 enemies in your executioner's cutting maelstrom, and let's say you hit 3 enemies, well, you should have 3 attacks, which should generate 3 valor points. That's not how it works, and because of that, I will never use cutting maelstrom until they fix that. So we're going to go with berserker's rampage, which we've already covered once, and then we're going to grab valorous chain because I'm building this guy to kind of use an AoE two-handed axe. Next, we're going to be grabbing fanaticism. At first glance, fanaticism does not seem that strong because you lose 10% of your max health every turn in order to gain fury. If you use a mastery book on it though, you gain fury at the end of your turn, which is much better than losing 10% of your max health in order to gain fury. So make sure you master this before you grab it. Have a mastery book ready. Otherwise, don't grab it and just wait for a respecialization, because losing 10% of your max HP every turn is not a good trade-off. But because the upgraded version is so good, it's worth grabbing. Next up, we have ecstasy. So ecstasy will work really well with fanaticism, especially when you are unable to, well, you know, get under 50% health or 30% health or whatever. So ecstasy in combination with fanaticism will really increase your damage, especially because you'll always have critical hits. And finally, lone wolf. Lone wolf is my favorite level 10 ability for the warrior tree, simply because alacrity just isn't that good. I would much rather kill the enemies that have ranged attacks or for AoE attacks before they're able to attack me, or just move out of the AoEs. So it's not really worth it in my opinion. Lone Wolf's much better. Moving on to our third axe build. Now our third axe build is going to be kind of a mix of the two, but not really. So this third axe build is going to be all about doing the most amount of damage possible on one attack. So we're going to use Berserker. Whatever you do, do not open with Berserker's Rampage when you have this build. Then we're going to grab Valorous Duel, which will generate a Valor point whenever you engage an enemy, which is nice. Then we're going to take Recklessness. Recklessness gives you your first ability in every fight, deals double damage. And if it's upgraded, it deals 150% more damage instead of just 100% more damage. Recklessness does not trigger well with Rampage. It only gives you your first attack out of the 3 as an increase. So don't open up with Rampage or any multi-attack when you have Recklessness up. This is mainly meant to deal a ton of damage one attack. After Recklessness, we're going to grab Ecstasy because generating critical hits, always great. And then finally, Lone Wolf once again. That is why we went with this. Now, some people may be wondering why I didn't grab Sentinel as a overall unit trope for any of these axe builds. And quite frankly, it's because I don't think Riposte is actually that good of a buff. I would much rather use my axe builds as melee DPS versus using them as a support tank, because there are other units out there that do tanking better. Quite frankly, just because there was heavy armor involved doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a better build. Once again, I'm not going to be digging into any of the legendary weapons or unique builds when it comes down to axes or in general. I highly recommend looking into the legendary weapons once you find them. The reason why I haven't made a video on them is because, quite frankly, I like them to be a surprise. I don't like spoiling a lot of the game. This, as soon as you load in, you're able to see all of this except for what the mastery does. So I am spoiling it a little bit, but this will just help you figure out how you want to plan out your builds for the late game. And remember, all of these builds are pretty useful and don't require specific weapons. However, I did make a one-handed axe build and then two-handed axe builds. As always, these builds are my opinion, which means if you guys don't like them, then you're wrong. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and you would like to see any content such as this. Make sure to like the video, leave a comment, and do that thing over there. Subscribe to the channel. Until next time, have a good one.